So, what is up, Rehab to Performance podcast listeners? Today we have a special guest and former Western States graduate on the show. Dr. John Baker is a chiropractor, certified strength and conditioning specialist, and DNS exercise trainer. Dr. John owns and operates Swell Wellness on the North Shore of Oahu with his wife, Dr. Lily, and treats professional surfers in Hawaii and on the world tour. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. John.
Thank you, boys. Stoked to be here.
Let's go.
So I guess I'll kick us off real quick. Kind of with your sports background, I saw you had your CSCS. You treated like a wide variety, kind of worked with a lot of athletes beforehand. I was reading about a little bit. So if you kind of want to dive into your background and then how you got into chiropractic, just how you ended up where you are.
Um, yeah, that's a good question. You'll learn that you have to tell this question, you have to answer this question like all the time when you start practicing. Like everyone wants to know, like, how did you end up right here? And I want to always know the same thing, like, cool, yeah, how'd you end up right here on my table? But so basically I grew up playing sports and I was always really into sports, like that was my thing. And my main sports, like up until high school, was like baseball, basketball, and football. And then in high school, you'd have to walk past the pool to go to the basketball courts that the freshmen would practice on. And there was this guy named Nick Pavich, who was the captain of the water polo team. And me and my buddy were both like 6'3", 190. Like I'm the same size I was then, like literally. And this guy would just be like, you guys are going to play water polo. So that guy got me into water polo because he basically harassed us until he said yes. And then that got me to go to California for school. That got me to then lifeguard for the city of San Diego. While lifeguarding for the city of San Diego, my body started to break down and I had no money and no resources. So then I moved back to Chicago where I grew up. When I moved back to Chicago, I got jobs. I got really lucky just working in gyms that we worked with a lot of like NFL and D1 athletes. Like we did a lot of NFL combine prep and we worked for a lot of the like Bears players and stuff like that. And other players from other teams who were just kind of from Chicago would come in. So that's where I got exposed to just working with like really, really high level athletes and how when you work with that level of athlete, things don't always from the textbook apply because there's so many things that these people are doing. You can't just follow like, well, this is what the workout is. It's like, well, yeah, but he's going to go run routes for 3 hours after this. So like you have to take that into consideration. Otherwise, you just break these dudes. And then one of the bosses that I had there was also the chiropractor for the Chicago Bears and Chicago Cubs. So then at some point, I was just kind of like, I really like this, but this isn't really like intellectually stimulating enough for me. So I want to go back to school so that way also when people are like, hey, this hurts, I'm not just going to be like, I think it's fine. You know, I could like kind of triage it and like vertically integrate the whole system if I wanted to. So that's when I ended up going back to Western States. And then while I was there, I was working at a company called Kabuki Strength. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but like Chris Duffin was my boss. And we had this guy, Mike Rentala, come out and he taught DNS seminars. And because I was working there, I got to go to those DNS seminars for free, which was sick because I had no money at the time. And when I remember talking to him and he was like, oh yeah, I worked a little bit with like pro surfers in the World Surf League. And I was like, holy cow, like that's an option. I never thought about that. So then I just basically like harassed him over and over and over again. And then Patrick Helma, Dr. Helma, who now works at UWS, he had just gotten hired when I started at UWS. So then my wife, who I was dating at the time, we met at Western States, told me about how he used to work for the World Surf League and American Beach Volleyball. So then I just emailed that dude and I was like, hey man, here's my background. I used to lifeguard. Like I'm super into that whole thing. Like would love to just chat. And so I went to his office. Thinking back on it, like I don't even really remember much of the conversation. I had so much adrenaline through me. I think I was basically just blacked out. And we ended up vibing though. I can't remember like 98% of what I said, but it worked well. So then he connected me with this guy named Dr. Tim Brown, the guy who started SPRT. And Tim's worked with like the World Surf League. He was the medical director of the Northern Hemisphere for a long time because they used to split it between the Northern and Southern Hemisphere. And yeah, same thing. Basically just harassed him to the point where he was able to get on a phone call with me. I think he just out of like pity. Same reason why I played water polo. It was like, I just got to agree to so this dude gets off my freaking back. And then I remember him being like, so what's your goals? And I was like, well, you got to retire someday, right? I just want to take your job. And it just kind of happened to be this like weird string of events. that ended up leading me to get invited out in school to go work at the US Open of Surfing, and then kind of just making connections. And then we were thinking about going to Alaska because Alaska has really good reimbursement rates. And then we were trying to figure out like, okay, well, how do we leave Alaska for the winter? Because I don't want to be there for that. I'm gonna go to like Hawaii or Costa Rica. And then we started spending so much time thinking about how to leave Alaska. We were like, okay, well, if we're thinking about leaving so hard, we probably shouldn't go. And I remember talking to Tim Brown one day, and he was like, the North Shore of Oahu could really use someone like you and your wife. So then we're like, all right, screw it. If someone's got to jump on that grenade, let's go do it. And we just burned the ships, sailed across the ocean basically, and here we are. So that's how I got
That's
to
awesome.
That is an unreal story. I wanted to ask how was working the US Open as a student or even prior to graduating?
Yeah, it was really, really, really cool. Like that was definitely one of the coolest experiences. It's really funny though, because like by technicality, you can't really do anything. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of like you're like writing stuff down, you're like taking the intake, and then you're like, it's like the same thing in the school where you're like, okay, 1 second, I gotta go talk to someone. And then you're like, okay, Tim, so they said their knee hurt, they had an injury on the knee like 4 years ago. I'm not gonna adjust it, but I'm thinking I'm just gonna start like, doing some soft tissue work or something like that. And he'll be like, okay, good. Like, what orthos did you do? And you're like, okay, this is what I did. And he's like, okay, good, go. And you like run back and you're like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. And it was just a really cool experience. It's like you need experiences that put places in logical order. Like Kabuki was one of those things for me. And I hope none of them listen to this and get offended by this. But like in my mind before I worked there and I was in Chicago, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like this like massive company. These guys are like industry leaders, like thought leaders, you know. And then you get there and you're like, oh, actually, this is just like 20 dudes working their ass off that are the same as me. And then it's like the same thing with the US Open. You're like, oh my gosh, these people are like the best in the world. Like they work with the best in the world. And you get there and you're like, well, I can hang. Like I can do this. And like you need those things where all of a sudden like reality is kind of like shattered open in front of you. And you realize you're like, oh wow, I am so much more capable at this. And I remember like coming back from that and telling so many of my friends, like, you're from Canada. It's like you like hockey?
Of course, yeah.
Right. Just go find whoever's the motherfucker in charge of all of hockey and just DM him and email him and call him, because everyone's going to be reaching out to their local high school coach and they're going to be like, well, that's probably the logical starting place. Like, no, screw that. Just go to the top. If you want to work with the best, just go there. And that's when I kind of realized like, wow, there are no rules to this game. If you just go in there and you just prove yourself, there's no like 20-year plan. Everything's an open book, and it's just up to you to have the tenacity and to have the freaking willpower to bet on yourself and like put yourself in situations where you're like, well, like I remember when I started working with Billy Kemper here, I had a moment where I was like, well, I'm either gonna have to move after this or I'm gonna be like rock solid in this community.
And
And
sorry to interrupt here. For anybody who doesn't know, Billy Kemper is one of the world's best big wave surfers. So pretty high praise.
yeah. And like, there's gonna be moments out there where like you put big risk and there's big reward, but there's also big risk. But like who better to bet on than yourself? So that was a really roundabout answer to that question. But it was really cool working the US Open. It was a really awesome experience. And it made me realize that everything's attainable in life if you just have the grit and the willpower to figure out who you need to talk to and what you need to do to prepare yourself outside of those conversations. Like I didn't go out in school. Like no one I went to school with ever saw me anywhere because I would just come home and read. On the weekends, I bought a trailer and I left it out in Newport, Oregon. I would drive out to the coast with my wife and we would surf and we would sit in the trailer in the rain and read and study. So it's
That's
like,
awesome.
you're ready. Like if you put in the work, you're ready. And when that moment comes, just shoot, score.
For sure. No, I think that's a great answer. Speaking of Dr. Tim Brown and SPRT, do you want to give just a quick rundown for the people in the audience who don't really have a background in SPRT?
Yeah. So SPRT was really really difficult for me to like accept, because you get so taught like the whole like pin and stretch, and like ART is such a big thing. And it's like so similar and the exact opposite of ART. Like ART, you're like getting in there. You're like not using lubricant. You're like compressing and squeezing, and your hand hurts afterwards. And you're like basically like, this might hurt. SPRT is the same logic, but what you're really doing is it's called the Art-Schultz principle. And basically what that is, I mean, everyone's in school probably, so they probably still remember this. But if there's docs who are out of school, you might have forgotten this. So I'm going to repeat it for them, where it's like the nerve that innervates the skin basically is also innervating the muscle that it's passing through and everything else. So what Tim found was that when you would go really deep on athletes, they might feel really good, but they perform the worst they've ever performed in their entire life. And the way I basically think about it is I think about the nervous system like a small child. Okay. So if I want a small child to do something, I can either like make them think it's really cool, like, hey, it's so cool to eat vegetables. Like dad loves vegetables. They're the best. And they're going to be like, oh, okay, cool. I love vegetables too. I want to be like dad. Or you can be like, sit down, eat those. And you can punish them. They basically shut down. Like it loses any spark of life. The essence or chi or whatever you want to talk about is just like gone. It's just submission and rolling over. So what Tim found was when he would go really deep on people, the muscle would give way and it would go flaccid and it would like release tension, but it had zero ability to contract and work in the high athletic environments that these people would demand their bodies to be in. So what he found was if you just went light over and over and over again, just the skin to the first barrier of resistance, then the muscle would release. And basically what you're doing is you're reorganizing the subsystems between the homunculus and the tissue that you're touching and trying to reorient itself with itself without trying to force it into anything. And what he found with this was that athletes started to perform astronomically better. And they felt the same, but performed way better. So he basically just started making an entire course around it. And what's funny is it's called SPRT, Selective Proprioceptive Response Technique. And if you ask him now, he's like, I'm kind of an idiot. I should have thrown an O in there. So that way it's sport, but it's SPRT and it's too late to change that now.
Oh, that's awesome. Being around the Kabuki guys, did you ever get an exposure to Dr. Philip Snell and his dermal traction method? Because it sort of sounds like there's a little bit of overlap between these two approaches.
Yeah. I had a ton of time with Snell. Snell is awesome. I would love to nerd out with Snell more, knowing what I know now and having a lot more experience underneath my belt. But yeah, so I do that a lot. And I use it mostly in like a triage sort of way, where I kind of look like, can we flare something up or relieve something from kind of having that traction on it? I don't know if it's like, I don't really know exactly how similar it would be, but it's similar in the sense that you're not trying to inundate and force your hand on something. You're trying to play with the nervous system. And I think that's like, when you go back to like old school chiropractic, you know, I know Western states, Richard, I know nothing about your school. I really don't know anything about any of the other schools, to be honest. So sorry to all the other people listening to this, but like old school chiropractic was like nervous system based. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's kind of quacky and whatever, you can have your own opinion. But I think it's spot on, but just how it went about articulating that was wrong, because probably at the time they just didn't have the ability to articulate that we do now. But at the end of the day, what Snell's doing and what Tim Brown is doing is trying to manipulate the nervous system to provide a unique and novel stimulus for the system to basically hit a reset and reorganize itself and recalibrate in a way that's providing the greatest possible output with the least possible input. Because at the end of the day, think about the laws of thermodynamics, equal and opposite reaction. If you inundate someone or if you do a really hard adjustment, that's a really hard rebound that has to happen. So if you can do less and get a better outcome, then there's going to be less rebound. What's the biggest complaint that most people get? They're like, oh man, I felt so good. And then I sat in my car, or then I got home, or then I woke up the next day. Well, if you do a big input, it's going to have to rebound a lot. If you do a small input, it doesn't have much room to rebound. That's going to last a whole lot longer. And I think that's basically the logic that's governing behind both Snell's neurocentric approach and Tim Brown's SPRT approach, although they're going about it in very different ways.
Nice. Kind of while we're on the topic of like systems and everything else, you brought up your background in like DNS earlier. Um, have you had like major pushback from like really go into the foundations with like these pro athletes? Kind of how you're incorporating the, foundational strength with the top tier.
Yeah. I don't really do much DNS at all, actually. What I found was it's too slow. And no offense to anyone who likes DNS, if you got time, I take cash only. Like I don't do insurance. So people are paying per visit and I don't have like, okay, well, we're going to work on this for like 4 visits and then we're going to like roll on your side. They're going to be like, dude, I'm going to spend 10 grand. I'm not doing that. So what's actually really interesting is I think DNS is spot on. It definitely helps shape my process. But when you really think about it, the child's spine is basically like this still. It hasn't developed the full S curve. You know what I mean? So why am I trying to train someone in the way that the spine hasn't fully developed yet? So when you look at like a DNS poster, like I have the DNS poster in my practice, even though I don't really follow it that much, the baby and the person don't look the same. Like look at it. They don't look the same. The child would have the pelvis untucked. The rib cage and pelvis are not stacked. The pelvis is behind the rib cage. Now, in the other DNS poster, what you have is you have this whole thing of they're like, well, these are the 5 options you have for like holding yourself against gravity. Yeah, all those make sense, but what my wife found was this thing called bowspring. And bowspring works a lot better in our practice, at least, and a lot faster. And it's a lot more palatable to these people who are like, they're not motor idiots. Like 80% of my practice, not my wife's practice, but my practice is like professional surfers. And a lot of them are not just like kind of pro, they're like very professional. And they don't really need all this like they don't need this whole long progression. And one thing that's really interesting about bowspring is it's kind of utilizing the entire fascial system at one time. And it makes things really quick. And it's almost like light bulbs just go off in the nervous system. And you can see them in like one visit be like, holy shit, I just got it. And then they're good. And like it makes a lot more sense because you feel it right away. And maybe I'm just bad at DNS. Like I totally acknowledge that there's a possibility that I just suck and I didn't really pick up the information the way it was supposed to be presented. And that's on me. But I just find this to be a lot better because in one visit, I can fix someone's hip for the most part. And then when they go to Pilates or when they go work out or they're just walking their dog, they understand how to integrate that. And from hour 1, they're integrating this. It's not like, okay, we're going to teach breathing and then we're going to teach like dead bug and then you're going to go practice that. And then a month from now, we're going to slowly work to squatting or walking. And again, maybe I just do it poorly, but that's my personal take. But I think the logic makes total sense. I just think the pelvis has to get behind the rib cage. And if you stack them, it makes total sense from like a line drawing perspective of like, oh yeah, this makes sense that this straight line would be against this straight line. But go look at people in the NBA, go look at people in the Olympics, go look at track and field athletes, go look at an animal, go look at a cat. None of those people behave in a bowspring way or in a DNS way. One thing I noticed at Kabuki was like Richard Olm, my wife went to one of his seminars, his like strength DNS seminar, and he was talking about like how you have to like bring the ribs down, have the pelvis so your like body is like this on the bench, back flat on the bench. No one at Kabuki would have been able to bench press nearly the same amount. So like if that was the best way, how come the world record holders don't do that? I think that, I mean, like it's just that simple, you know?
Mm-hmm. That makes total sense.
No knock against DNS. DNS, I love you. Thank you so much for everything. But I think it's like 90% complete.
Yeah, no, for sure. Speaking of, I guess your population that you treat being, let's just say 80% surfers, as you mentioned, what do you think the biggest difference between treating that population and just say an average Joe off the street? Is it really just being able to progress through movement faster, or what really is the biggest difference that you find?
No, it's like a neural thing. and you can feel it in their tissues. It's different. Like it's very, very different. So stay with me here as I try to like use words that aren't real words. So like there's different densifications in the tissue. And sometimes like in a normal person, the tissue just feels like dried Play-Doh or something like that. And it just doesn't want to let go. It feels like you're like pulling against like a resistance band, like a thick one. And it's like the whole time it just wants to like go back. And like you do something, you do manual therapy and it wants to go back, or you like trick it with like MET or something like that. And it just like it kind of wants to go back. You can do like pails and nails until the cows come home and it just kind of wants to go back. The elite level athletes, their tissues want, it's like you can feel underneath your hand. They're like, oh my gosh, thank you for helping me out of there. Like I didn't want to be there. I want to be where you're taking me. And the tissues are just compliant. And they're so much more informative. Like when they give you an intake or like what happened, it's not like, oh, I don't know, like I was surfing and my hip hurt. You know, like Billy will be like, I was surfing and I went for a turn and it was right here. And I can remember like it was chandeliering and the lip was coming down. I hit this bump and they have this whole thing. But at the end of the day, the biggest difference to me is that like an average general population person, it's like you're trying to convince their body to change. And the pro surfers I work with, and I'm not going to speak to any other elite athletes, it's like their body is grateful for returning it to where it wants to be. And I think that's the most succinct way I could possibly put that.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So what are you going through? Because I know that like in R2P we use SFMA, FMS, those big functional screens. And I know you're talking a lot about movement. What is your kind of overall look on like watching these athletes move, and what is your approach?
Yeah, I don't use SFMA or FMS. I started to, not FMS. I used that like years ago when I was training people. It takes like an hour. And again, people are paying cash. Like I don't have that time. SFMA, I kind of used it. I think it works really well if you haven't like coached people. Like I've coached so many people from so many sports. I remember I used to be so frustrated when I was starting out because I would like ask other coaches with like more experience. I'd be like, how did you know that? How did you start there? And they'd be like, oh, like I could just see it. And I would always be like, what? That's a bullshit answer. And I would get frustrated because I'd be like, no, this needs to be standardized. If it's not objective, it's trash. You know, if you can't articulate it, then like that's stupid. Well, I'm that guy now, so joke's on me. But like you just look at people and you can just see how they're sitting. Like they might be like this, or like maybe they're like collapsed, or like maybe they'll say something that's like kind of like emotionally charged in a positive or negative way, and their body reacts, and you're like, oh, that's a clue. I watch their Instagrams. If I get a new patient, I'll pull up their Instagram. Surfers post tons of content. Like that is literally their job. Make content, hope someone pays you for it. That's the economy. So I'll go watch them surf on their Instagram and be like, okay, what are they doing in their approach? How are they pumping down the line? How are they popping up? Like, what's their stance like? But really, like, if you just watch them do basic things, and like, this is my favorite thing about ART is the diagnostic algorithm. Now, I'm not going to tell you the diagnostic algorithm because that would maybe get me in trouble, but I'm going to tell you what I do. And I'll put my hands on people and I'll just feel. And you just get really good with feeling with your hands. Like it's insane how good you can get with feeling with your hands if you actually go into work every day with the intent of feeling with your hands. And like 90% of the patient appointment, probably not that much, 90% of the time I'm doing manual therapy, my eyes are closed. I'm basically just meditating and just using my hands. Like this is the only stimulus I have. And you'll just start to get good at it. Like if someone's like moving, they're like, oh, I got a shoulder problem. I'll just put my hand on their back, put my hand on their chest and be like, okay, do it. And you're like, boom, that's the spot. And I look at it like you're untying a knot. I don't think you need to understand the whole thing, but it's like, okay, you guys fish? You ever fished?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, like a bait cast reel with the spool, You ever have your braking system way too loose and you cast it and the thing just spirals out? Okay, you can't just start pulling on line. Like, you're like, oh, there's a knot.
Yeah, that's
That's
a great
your
analogy.
Your diagnosis is there's a knot. So if you just start pulling on it, you're just going to make it worse. Like, my grandfather used to yell at me all the time for this because I would just be in a hurry and I would just be rushing and pulling on it. Like, you have to be meticulous. You don't need to know what step 2 is. You don't need to know what the final step is. You just need to know, where's that first loop I pull. So you feel, and you feel when that movement is moving not normal. And you just have to feel enough and feel yourself and be honest with yourself that you're not moving normal too. So don't use yourself as the baseline. You're using yourself as an N to add to your total N. But what you start to feel is you're like, oh, okay, it feels like the rhomboid's kind of stuck there. So you're just like, okay, let's work on the rhomboid and let's get that going. And I always move the person's body. Like, that's one big thing in SPRT, like, get their body moving, because the whole time you're doing that, you're integrating their nervous system into the motor pattern and understanding how to do that better. If you just have them sit there and they don't do anything, it doesn't work as well. I mean, it works, but it doesn't work as well. And again, like, I'm cash based, so like my performance is being judged every single second because they're not thinking about it, but like, they know that this is coming out of their own pocket, not Blue Cross Blue Shield, not Aetna, none of that stuff. So like, you feel and you do it. And as you're moving, so say I'm working on the shoulder, like, I'm moving their shoulder. I'm getting real-time feedback. My eyes are closed. It's the only sense that I have going on. So I have my hand feeling and I have my other arm moving. And as you're doing that, you start to be like, oh, okay, and then it needs that. And then you just start to like move your body and you're like, okay, now it needs this. And what you find is basically like you're doing like a ballroom dance with their limb. And once you do that, especially with your eyes closed, at least with me, it doesn't even become two bodies. It's just one thing. And it's like, you ever have a Mac computer like from like 10 years ago where the screensaver was like this little wisp that floats through the whole thing? It turns into that. That's all you're seeing, at least me. That's all I'm seeing in my head is like that little ball of energy and how it's not fluidly going. And that's my whole diagnostic thing. And then the beauty of like real movement, like if you really think about like ideal movement, is it doesn't really matter what's going on. I'm just going to bring you to what you're supposed to do. And I believe that's what Bowspring does really well. It's just the best explanation of the fundamentals possible. So then it's like, if you got a hip problem, I'm just going to make your hip move as freaking normal as possible. Now we have a window of opportunity now that I've just made it feel as normal as possible. And the only reason why I was able to make it normal as possible because I didn't just be like, okay, 3 strokes here, 3 strokes here. You close your eyes, you get intimate with what's going on. You let every single one of your senses drop into that feeling for that time, and you become their problem. Then afterwards, you're like, cool, that hip is moving perfect because I felt a perfect hip. And throughout that whole thing, it's not like I need to be like, pause, okay, let's check internal, external rotation. You did it the whole time. You know the whole time. You're getting real-time feedback. And then it's like, cool, here's how you use a hip. Here's how you actually get the ischium to spread. Here's how you get the femur to push backwards in the socket. Most people have labrum problems. Going back to the nervous system thing, what's wrong with the nervous system? It's not stable. So what does it do? It throws the hip forward. It pushes it into the soft tissue. Same with the shoulder. So what does it need to do? It needs to go backwards. That's why you have FAI. That's why you tore your labrum, is because it's freaking in the front of the socket. So you have to teach them, pull the femur back, actually use your glutes, spread your pelvis apart. So that you go, it's like I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, Griffin, you probably have, but when a wave approaches a reef, it goes like this and it bowls and goes over. It sucks from underneath and goes over. Nature has just nature has like a handful of things that it just repeats over and over and over and over again. The hips move the same way. Get their hips to go back, get their pelvis to spread. Understand that when they hip hinge over, this is not like a sagittal plane thing. This is a rotation thing. Everything is spirals. Even go down to the DNA, even go down to the muscle fibers. All it is spirals. Go to what it looks like when a sperm impregnates an egg. It's a spiral. So you teach them how to spiral their legs. So it doesn't really matter, like from an exercise standpoint of like, okay, well, we got to do step downs. No, if they do step downs poorly, it doesn't matter. If you teach them how to actually move their hip, now suddenly walking their dog, getting out of their chair, doing whatever it is they do in life, if you teach them how to do it that way, their whole life is physical therapy. Their whole life is the rehab. It's not like, okay, for these 3 minutes a day, you're going to do these exercises and that's going to fix it, because it's not. they don't know how to integrate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was like spot on because, half the time you go somewhere, you do your rehab, 3 sets of 10, let's do it. And then you're out off on your own and you've got like 4 or 5 days to go and mess up everything that you just trained for in like that hour. But like you said, if you just teach that movement, I mean, the whole day is your rehab. So,
Yeah, like
yeah.
if they're not a professional athlete, the person who comes to me is like, I saw this guy, I saw this guy, I saw this guy. They were all insurance. It didn't work. So now I'm trying the guy who doesn't take insurance. And it's like, cool. And they'll go, I'll be like, well, I did this and that didn't work. And then I did a bunch of clamshells and that didn't work. I did this, I did that. And it's almost like I want to just be like, okay, here, in 10 minutes, I'm going to teach you how to properly distract, posteriorly shift your femur, and rotate your legs into internal rotation as you hip hinge over so you actually have true differentiation of the pelvis, spine, and hip. And then, dude, you can freaking go back to that same physical therapy and he's going to be like, amazing, I fixed the guy round 2. It's like, no, the exercises don't matter. Like, it's taken me 31 years and working with professional athletes, and I apologize to any of them who are listening to this, who I made do workouts. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It matters how you're doing it. If you're doing it correctly, I don't think it matters if you're doing a kettlebell bottom-up press, a bench press, a push-up, a freaking pushing a prowler across the field. Centrate your shoulder. Learn what that actually is. Because if your shoulder is actually centrated, everything is going to work. Like, that's the reason why like animals don't have to do fucking 3 sets of bench press and then some side step counts.
Yeah. And do you think that's maybe where you do align with DNS a little bit and joint centration?
Oh, 100%. And that's why I think that like I am totally on board with DNS except for the pelvis positioning. And I also think that like the way a lot of people teach DNS is that the ribs have to like come down. And I agree that you don't want to be like breathing with your ribs, like that doesn't make sense. But I think the intercostal muscles have to be eccentrically lengthened. When you look at animals, they live in eccentric length. So the way I understood DNS, and I could be wrong, again, I openly admit that. But the way I was taught about it is like, get everything contracted down, squeeze your abs. And that doesn't make sense. It's like Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. It's like, if I'm already short, where am I going to go? So I think the logic is totally right. Like, centrate it. But instead of like squeezing everything to centrate it, have maximal lengthening. Like, get big, expand your energy, expand your life. Like, okay. Close your eyes for a second. Let's do a little memory thing. Or let's take a little break. Okay. Think of the most hard. So, okay, I'm not going to try to sound like weird here, but like, do you guys have good relationships with your parents?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. So think about the love that your mother must have felt when you came out of the womb and she held you. She had been nurturing you for 9 months. Her whole life had been leading up to that moment. Her entire life changes when she realizes that you have materialized into a human being that her and the person she loves form. How does that make you feel? What is your rib cage doing? Is it collapsing or is it filling?
I don't think it's collapsing. Yeah.
So if feeling good went with collapsing the rib cage, why would you do that? The only time I ever see people with a collapsed rib cage is when they're scared or embarrassed. So my logic is, and this took a lot of deconditioning of a lot of really strong beliefs, and I like, this is really hard for me to admit, or not admit, but it was really hard for me to change and admit that I was wrong. And that's like a really difficult thing to do, especially for men. But I think it makes a whole lot more sense to have your rib cage big. So one thing that Louis Simmons says, if you guys are a fan of Westside Barbell or know who he is a pyramid can only be as tall as its base. So think about all of the origin insertions, like your serratus, your lat, all of that stuff. It makes, like, go back to your anatomy book. If you're still in anatomy lab, look at it. It makes so much more sense if the rib cage is wide. Plus, the pressure can distribute more. When the rib cage is wide, it looks like an egg. Remember, nature only has so many patterns that it repeats. Like, nothing in nature is collapsed. So that's one thing that I do disagree about with DNS. And again, I could have just learned it wrong.
Yeah. No, I get where you're coming from. Does that mean a lot of the work that you do with your surfers or whoever is not just thoracic mobility, but thorax in general mobility?
Yeah, for sure. So I think number one is like people have to, so people don't move well through the ribs. Like there's so many joints in there, there's so many degrees of freedom, and anytime people have more degrees of freedom, there's just more opportunity for them to screw that up. So what typically happens is people have certain ribs that move really well and certain ribs that don't move well. So getting people to actually start at the bottom of the rib cage and be like, okay, can you eccentrically lengthen these intercostals? Can you eccentrically lengthen these other intercostals? And you can't start in the front, because if you think about starting in the front, that collapses the back. So you have to think about growing angel wings. Okay. Think about growing angel wings. Expand the ribs from the back. As it expands from the back, you go outside. That buckle, like think about like what they teach you. They're like, oh yeah, the bucket handle like thing. Most people don't do that. Yes, that's what should be happening. Most people don't do that. So you have to teach them how to do that. And you have to teach them in a way that actually makes it so they have segmental control of the ribs going up it. And then once you get that and you get full rib cage expansion and breathing, well, it's actually, they don't get it super easy, but like it makes so much more sense to them. And it fits what they're doing so much better. And it decompresses the spine well. If you have the hips internally rotate, posteriorly shift, and actually turn on the glutes, like I think we've been thinking about the hips, like the glutes, wrong the whole time. Everyone's like, okay, when you get to the top of the squat, squeeze the hips. No, they lift. They lift. That's the one muscle that everyone thinks the origin pulls to the insertion. No, the femur gets pulled and lifted back. That just makes sense based off the way you think about every other muscle. So if you do that and the pelvis and the glutes lift up, and then you have the ribs that are inflated also, that decompresses the spine. Look at like a cat. A cat can get scorpioned all day and not blow out a disc. Any animal can do that all day and not blow out a disc. So there's one species that has been addressing this differently, and they're the ones that blow out discs.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Dr. Helma, I reached out to him before this conversation, and speaking of function, his quote was, you know, as most students go through their education, they tend to view the body from a compartmentalized standpoint. As a clinician, I frequently have to ask interns to take their blinders off and look at the whole patient. John tended to always look at the body from a functional standpoint and how everything interacts together. He said he did on occasion have to ask John to put his blinders on to address the presenting complaint prior to looking at function with the patient, which I thought was both equally awesome and funny. One of the questions that I had was, what is something that you see in surfers specifically that is their primary complaint? Not obviously all the time, but what's something in surfers that you're primarily working on with them?
One, I just think that's so funny. I knew I was gonna say it, even though you weren't. Even if you didn't say it. Helma, I used to be like, he'd be like, "What's going on?" And I would be like, "Well, their back hurts," but really it's from like their big toe, because they broke their big toe and now their foot doesn't get down. And when they go squat, this is what happens, and they wouldn't come back. And I'd be like, "Dude, I don't know why that guy didn't come back, or I don't know why he's seeing so and so. Like, they're not gonna fix him. I'm gonna fix him. He should be with me." And he'd be like, "Well, did you touch their back?" And I'd be like, "Well, no, it's a toe problem." He's like, "Well, next time you should probably like at least like touch their back, you know?" And I'd be like, "Okay, fine." But yeah, we had a lot of those conversations. But with surfers, a lot of it is low back and hips and shoulders. And really, I think it's funny because like as like a spine doctor, like, dude, I rub armpits and butts all day long. Like if someone comes in with like a disc complaint, I'm like, whoa, how did you find me? But also people in Hawaii don't have those problems. Really interesting. None of the problems that I saw in Portland, I see in Hawaii. That's a
Really?
none of them. None of them. Lifestyle is different. People live outside. People move. People to get sunlight. People take care of their bodies. People eat well. They don't wear shoes. They don't have the same problems. It's completely different and it's wild. But to digress to what you said. So the low back, a lot of people, so you basically got two options with the low back. One, you can figure out how to use your glutes well, and that's going to decompress your low back and allow for more room for you to go into extension. Because think about a facet problem. What's the issue? It's not extension. It's that you're jammed already and then you extended. So if you can get the ribs big, which most surfers do, most surfers have huge rib cages because they're like this paddling all the time. If you can get their hips to turn on, it decompresses their spine and they can paddle no problem. If they need more than that, you basically teach them how to do like, not like a full Valsalva, but like basically the way you would like brace in powerlifting, where you're going to like excurse your abdomen 360 degrees. Okay, you're going to kind of flatten out the diaphragm, but not in a way that you can't breathe or anything like that. And then that shifts. So when you look at the tension and the lines of the abdomen, it basically looks like a Chinese finger trap. You have the rectus, you have the transverse, you have one oblique, you have another oblique. There's no angle that's not covered in there. So going back to the eccentric lengthening, if you teach them to eccentrically lengthen all of their abdominal wall muscles instead of concentrically lengthen all of their abdominal wall muscles, suddenly all that pressure is now off their spine and put on the muscles. It's like it was designed to be that way, you know? So you get them to use their glutes, you teach them how to eccentrically lengthen their entire abdominal wall, and I guarantee that pain is going to be gone. They might not be able to do it for their entire session, and I tell them that. I'm like, hey, if you're in a contest, don't worry about this. If you're in like a high stakes moment, don't worry about this. But if you're able to paddle out super cool and just kind of cruise, like practice this. Maybe you can do it for 30 seconds. Maybe the next day you can do it for 33 seconds and just build it up and don't get angry about it. Just understand this is where you're trying to go. For shoulders, the biggest thing for me is that because they don't have the low back in the proper position, because their hips and rib cage aren't properly done, they're basically like straining their neck and they're using their traps, which pretty much comes down to they don't know how to use their serratus. Because if your serratus is on, then your shoulder blades can come out. And that way, when you come through, your shoulder stays in the thing. When you reach and you paddle, that's basically just they're an overhead athlete. You don't really think about it. But when you're reaching overhead, that would be like you trying to do a push-up with your arms like this. So teaching them how to use their serratus with their arm overhead like that drastically changes the game. And it's the people who don't do that, who don't have the serratus, they shrug like this, and then they go like that, and they have to internally rotate. Okay, grab your arm really quick. Okay? Okay, squeeze it. Which side of the hand are you squeezing with, the thumb side or the pinky side?
Thumb side.
Right. Richard?
Yeah, same.
Okay, so there's no such thing as straight lines. The whole sagittal frontal transverse plane, it's all a lie. It's just a convenient way to teach it, which is necessary, and I understand that. But it's all just spirals, because nature has nothing else but spirals and circles. So now, what I want you to do is grab it again and grip it with your pisiform and pinky. And what you'll also notice is the hand, the way you were taught, this is neutral. This is not neutral, because try to radial deviate and ulnar deviate. This is not neutral. This is like 30 degrees off center of the middle of that range. Okay, so put your hand like this, grab your wrist, and squeeze with the pinky side and pisiform side. This is what every single elite level rock climber does. Look at Alex Hanold. Go to a rock climbing gym. This is how they do that. Now, where did you feel the difference in the shoulder? Alternate back and forth, thumb side and pinky side. Pinky side, your shoulder integrates and centrates automatically. So the people who typically have shoulder problems, they're coming through like this, not like that. And I learned that at Kabuki Strength one time because Dr. Strange, who Griffin, you'll know, was doing a football bar press there, and his hands were going like this. And Coach Kyle Young, I don't know what he's doing now. I think he works for USA Powerlifting as like their head coach. But he told me, he was like, make them use the lat more. And I was like, okay, sure. Aye, Captain. So that then turned into, it's a hand issue, right? Which took me a long time to think about. But if you can get people to use this muscle right there and actually integrate from here all the way up, guaranteed it's going to take away their shoulder problem faster than freaking anything. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do any of that. It's a spiral issue. You're not even. So if you grip here, you're going like that. What is that going to do? That's going to throw your shoulder up. What's that also going to do? That's going to cause dysfunction at the cervicothoracic junction. And guess where most people get issues going into their arm? From right here. It's all just, it's just patterns. It's pattern recognition.
Richard, you got something to say?
Yeah. One thing earlier, you kind of mentioned like watching people's content. Surfers are big on like putting things online, getting it out there. But I read something that you did some like remote, like visit movement screen type. Do you still do any of that? And like if you
Oh
do,
yeah,
like
yeah,
how are you doing the remote visits? Like what does
yeah.
that kind of look like?
So um, I have two different ways I do remote stuff. So number one is we can just do telehealth appointments, and that's pretty much the same thing. You're just not going to do any manual therapy. You're just going to do all movement stuff, or you're going to teach them or inform them about how they can do their own manual therapy. And in that sort of way, I would basically do the same sort of thing where it's like, okay, what's your complaint? Okay, stand up. Can you take a breath for me? Up off the ground. How would you do it? Hey, can you grab that railing right there? Where are you grabbing? Do you feel it more on your thumb side or you're more on your pinky side? Hey, when you stand there, where's your weight? Can you turn to the side? I want to see where's your pelvis in relation to other things. So I just kind of do that sort of thing. And then I'll have them and I'll be like, okay, can you raise your arm overhead? And I'll kind of see it because you start to recognize it over time. You're like, oh, okay, that's pulling from right here. And then you're like, okay, is that pulling from like right here? And then they'll be like, yeah, that's crazy. How'd you know that? So then you just kind of run with that. The other way I do it is I use an app called PT Distinction, and it's fine. It's okay. I don't think there's any app out there that I found that's like really all that you would want it to be, but it's the best I found. And if anyone knows better, hit me up. I'd be really eager to know. But basically what I have people do is I have them take videos and put it in the app because I don't want people texting me a bunch of videos. That's just chaotic and I don't want my phone blowing up like that. So what I have them do is like they can put videos into the exact exercise. So that way it's all clean and organized and very systematic. Then what I do is about once a week for each person, I'll go on there. And then I have Loom. And whether I'm on my computer or I'm on my iPad, if I'm on my iPad, I'll watch the Loom. I'll watch it with Loom going. And then I'll take screenshots. You do that thing where you hit the volume and the thing. And then from there, it pulls up. And then I'll draw on it. And I'll be like, okay, see, we got a straight line here. And then this goes this way. And it's basically like you're drawing like the X's and O's like they have on like Monday Night Football. Then if it's my computer, it's kind of nice because then I can show up like this, where like Richard, where you're at right now is them doing the movement. And then I'm here. So then I can be like, okay, like as they're doing it, I'll be standing there and I'll be like, okay, see, this is what we need. And this is what you're doing. And that's really nice. Like if you want to work with people remotely and like really get into the nuance thing and they like want to do a whole lot, not just like 1 hour a week, that is the most effective way to do it that I found. And it's really cool because from anywhere in the world, they get like a one-on-one coaching experience without you actually having to be there. And you can look at like an entire week's worth of their workouts really quickly. So it's really time effective for you as well. And then that drives the cost way down because they're paying for your time, not only just the result in your knowledge, but your time too. So it makes it really palatable to people. And in my mind, I think a lot of people need to humble themselves about this. Stop overcharging people. Your goal is to help people. If you just do a good job and help people, you're not going to have a problem making money. I don't think so. Like I work like literally like 4 half days a week, and I make more than anyone I know that I went to school with. A busy week for me is like 20 hours, 15 hours. You don't need to charge people a lot. You just need to deliver.
So one thing with the remote, I know you mentioned like the physical drawings of like their movements and workouts that they're sending you. One thing like I even struggle with in person right now, I just got into student clinic trying to cue people because I know what my body feels like. I know how it's supposed to feel, but what are you doing, especially remotely? Like, how are you giving these like tactile cueing for any type of movement that you're doing with them?
Yeah, that's difficult. That takes some practice.
Yeah.
The thing you want to try to do is select exercises where if they do it wrong, they just can't do the exercise. Like they just try to find things that like and have built-in high levels of failure to basically make it so that they're like, oh my gosh, that exercise is so hard. It's like, yeah, there you go. So like if someone keeps collapsing in like their squat, give them a zombie squat to a box. Like put something there so it's like, hey, you can't control going past like 18 inches, so like we're not even going to let you do that, and we're going to put the bar in a way that if you round over, the bar's dropping. You know, do an exercise like, have them maybe do uh, a bird dog, but have them do it next to a wall so they can't shift. They're going to learn really fast that they're pretty bad at that. And you just have to get really creative with like, what is their environment and what can you leverage in the environment and how can you leverage the exercise to make it so it's inherently unable to do any other way than you want. And it is kind of unfortunate because it doesn't work for everyone. Like if people have really big egos, they don't like that because they don't want to feel stupid. Because you're going to give them an exercise and they're going to be like, isn't that kind of silly? And they're going to do it and you're going to attack their ego, even though you didn't mean to. And then they're going to get all butthurt. But that's fine. They can either continue to work with you and get where they're trying to go or not. That's up to them.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Really
love that
good.
answer.
Yeah.
I had a question just based on how you talk about integrating SPRT, but also movement with your patients. Whenever I see your story, you got one of the big wave surfers moving around, whether on the ground or with weights. So I was wondering how you incorporate or transition manual therapy and movement. I like, if you know Greg Lehman's quote, like calm shit down, build shit up. And so I was wondering if you have a similar approach, especially with surfers.
Yeah, so I mean there are people who I only do manual therapy with. That's just what they want, and that's fine. That's their shit. My job is I bring them to port. If you don't want to go to the port I think you should go to, that's fine. And still your shit. And that's just the reality. And I think that was a really hard pill for me to swallow, but it just is what it is. Like you have to meet them based off what they're willing to do, especially if you're taking cash. But what I really try to explain to people is like, hey, I am providing you a window of opportunity. I cannot fix you. It's like Tony Robbins, like, I am not your guru. I am not a savior. I am not a healer. You are a healer. You heal yourself. All I can do is put you in a position to spend a lot less time unwinding patterns than you could do yourself. And then if you actually want to get better, I need to show you this and you need to do it yourself, because the only way out of this is for you to get yourself out of it. And I can be there for you and I can hold your hand. And if you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. Just let me know. I will happily take $200 once a week for the rest of your life. And you'll find out real quickly if people want to do that or not. But I think like keep it simple, like focus on fundamentals. And that's the one thing that I think Bowspring and DNS are both really good at is their fundamentals. But you also have to let the person know that it's just fundamentals. Like I tell people, I'm like, you can become a Bowspring person. Like my wife is like a Bowspring person. Like that's her yoga, that's her Pilates, that's up to you. I use it as a novel way for you to learn how to use your hip or your shoulder or your rib cage or your foot. And then the real medicine is you figuring out how to do this in every single thing. So I don't do it like most people. Like Landon McNamara pays me to just train him. And then other times just do manual therapy. And if people want to do that, that's great. Other times I teach them a fundamental, and then it's up to them to figure out what things in life they do and how to integrate it into that. But people in my personal experience don't respond super well to like, here, let me show you this exercise and you're going to do it for like 3 reps of 10 or you're going to do it for 2 minutes a day. No one does it. Talk to people. They're always like, oh yeah, patient compliance is so hard. You're doing it poorly. You're not listening to them. They don't want that. And they're just doing it because like their insurance is paying for it. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, if I just listen to this, he'll rub me for 40 minutes too, So like, does that answer the question?
No, absolutely. No, I love that answer. One of my mentors, Dr. Tyler Johnson, if you had any overlap with him in school, he always talks to me about just getting the patient moving of whatever they're going to do. And also mentions how you were talking about before, like sometimes the mechanism that we think is happening in getting the patient better actually might not be the mechanism that we intended on it, and that's completely okay. Such as like having somebody run through DNS, and maybe it isn't like a full neurologic thing. Maybe it's just like lengthening the spine or lengthening certain areas like you talked about, and you're reversing like an ischemic response that they had. So no, I think that's super cool. One other question that I had was Obviously, you take a very holistic approach to clinical care, especially being on the North Shore of Oahu. I was wondering where diet and nutrition rank in your, priority list of tools with patients.
Yeah, so really good question. I probably have like the opposite problem that most people listening to this podcast will have, where like I have like old school hippie diets, like, oh, like, don't worry, like I'm juicing. And it's like, okay, so you're down in like 1,000 grams of sugar a day in liquid form. Like that's not it, bro. So, or they're like, oh, like, don't worry, like, you know, it's just different things. But I think what really it comes down to is you have to get into circadian biology. And this is where you have to have at least have a base understanding of quantum physics. You don't need to be a PhD in quantum physics, but you need to have a base understanding of quantum physics. And if you want to know people to look at Jack Kruse. Kruse is spelled Kruse, or Courtney Hunt. Courtney Hunt is an MD out of Scottsdale, Arizona. This will blow your mind. Okay, so we talked about nature's patterns. Nature designed things well. And if you believe that there's a creator that's higher than we are, your body too was not meant to be stupid and break down. That's your fault. It was meant to thrive. So think about, you're in Canada, right? You don't have a lot of sun this time of year. Okay, so what increases POMC? And POMC is what's going to increase melanopsin. And melanopsin is basically the most important thing you've never heard about. Well, what increases POMC is cold exposure. Wow. So if I increase POMC, then I'm going to increase my melanopsin, which is mean that I'm going to be able to convert sunlight to DC electricity more effectively. And my mitochondria are going to run on DC electricity because there's melanin inside my mitochondria. And that's what's really powering things, because it's all coming down to light. Everything's only light at the end of the day. And this is a rabbit hole. But so isn't it kind of crazy that nature designed it where like you have no sunlight, but you're getting cold, and the cold makes it so that you can take advantage of the little bit of sunlight you have? And then also DHA. Where is food found with DHA? It's found only in cold places. So think about it. What happens before winter? Salmon run. Salmon don't run in the middle of winter. So salmon run, you get a fuck ton of DHA. Then it gets cold. Your ability to take in sunlight goes up. You need to eat in accordance where you're living. You can't be like, oh, I had a mango. Mangoes are super healthy. Not if it came from Costa Rica. Now your gut thinks it's the middle of summer and your eyes think it's the middle of winter, and you're not going outside because you're sitting in an air conditioning room. Or you're sitting in a heated room. So your body doesn't know that it's cold. So your body doesn't know how to use the sun effectively for the time of year that it is. And if your body doesn't know how to use the sun effectively, diet and nutrition, like, it doesn't matter if their circadian health is off. Everything has to start at circadian health. And I will be happy to share this PDF document that is from this place in Canada. And so look at, like, there's a ton of people from Ethiopia that go to Canada because of the immigration thing. Guess what? MS doesn't exist in Ethiopia. Guess what exists in crazy high amounts in that population in Canada? That's because they don't have the sun. Their body is not adapted through generations of this sort of evolutionary pattern to be able to handle that. So it doesn't matter what they're eating. They're going to get MS. You know what I mean? Like, you have to understand the base of it. And it doesn't, until you fix that, I don't even think it's worth having the conversation with people, to be honest. Because so many things, like, I know people that my wife has treated who have crazy autoimmune conditions, who have seen every doctor under the sun, doctors who are like experts, all this stuff. And it's like, you get them to go out in the sun, you get them to eat the foods that are from where they're at, that have the same sort of light and biological signature that your body has, things go away. The only reason why people have these crazy things is because they're living in disharmony with the environment. And I'm not saying that you need to go live in an igloo, but I'm saying maybe you should go cold plunge for like 2 minutes a day if you're sitting inside a warm classroom in the middle of Alberta.
I love that. Yeah, no, I love that answer.
Yeah, so it didn't really answer your question, but that's what
Okay, cool. Um, Getting up on about an hour here. Richard, you got any other questions?
No major questions. I know I have a rabbit hole to go down to now, but
Yeah, we got
yeah.
plenty of rabbit holes. So before we finish here, Dr. John, we got a little bit of a rapid fire question round to finish this off. So first off, what is your favorite non-clinical book, either fiction or nonfiction?
Universal One by Walter Russell. And
Cool. And
then
what's it about?
you should read it.
Okay.
It will blow your mind. Like it will literally it's basically a different way to look at physics and quantum biology and scripture all in one.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
once you understand that, like everything else is built off basically how the rules of the game are played. And that's just the most beautifully well worded way of how the rules of this game are played.
That's unreal. Do you have a favorite clinical book?
Your anatomy textbook. You're only limited by your knowledge of anatomy. Like that's
True.
like Helma will agree with that. Any other person will agree with that. If you don't know what's underneath your skin, like the front of your hand or their skin, like the front of the hand, the back of the hand, if you don't know what you're feeling, you're useless. Like you're faking this. Like you are no better than you can't do anything. You have to know the anatomy like it's your fucking job because it's your fucking job.
Yeah, no, I love that. That is very true. Um,
I yell at so many people like they get worried about so many things and then they'll be like, oh yeah, what's the insertion of that? I'm like, how the fuck are you going to rehab someone if you don't even know where that connects? That's day one. Like that's literally day one.
yeah, back in Western States, Dr. Borman's lab, the legend
Fundamentals.
himself,
Everyone wants to do what's crazy. No one wants to focus on fundamentals.
for sure. Um, if you weren't a chiropractor or anything related in healthcare or training, what would you be?
The goofy thing is I do both of these things. I would either be in industrial real estate or a stock trader. Stocks, and in my free time I work with a guy and we're doing industrial real estate in Reno, Nevada.
Unreal. Love
Nice.
that.
If you keep things under full time, they stay fun.
Love it. Um, who is your favorite surfer to watch?
Ooh. Um, Probably Tosh Tudor or Mikey February.
Mikey February.
It's
Unreal.
like the smooth clap. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think it's cool when someone like attacks the lip really hard, but like smooth, drawn out lines, like it moves at the speed in which like my soul moves in a weird way. And then of course John. Like John's a friend
Of
of
course.
mine. He is unreal. Like that dude has made a deal with the devil. It's I enjoy watching him because you're like the ocean bent for him. Like it's not
For
even
sure.
swimming. You're not watching a person like dance on a wave. You're watching the wave dance with John. But that's a different category. I don't think we can put him in the same category as everyone
No,
else.
absolutely not. No, it is insane watching him. And then any closing, I guess, advice that you have for the audience, specifically probably students or new grads?
Yeah. Um, I would say get your head in a book. When you feel like pulling your head out of a book, put it in a different book and understand that like this is your life and understanding the body and physics and the quantum and how it relates to like scripture and what different religions have saying is the most interesting Sudoku puzzle you could ever do. And then also be willing to invest money in different techniques or philosophies, and then also admit when it's time to get off that train. You know, like the Chinese or the Japanese have a saying that if you realize you're on the train heading the wrong way on the tracks, get off as fast as possible. Don't keep riding that thing. You're just getting farther away. So like if you're like, hey man, I've spent 20 grand into I don't know, cranial sacral or like something like that or SOT and you're like, I just don't think it's working, pivot, get off that. And like, it's not a failure. Nothing is a failure if you learn something because it's going to inform something else. But be realistic that like someday the person that you're looking up to might not be who you look up to anymore. And that's okay.
I love that. 100% agree. Where can people reach out to you or follow you?
Yeah. So if you reach out to me, I will give you the time of day. I might not be like responding like right away. You know, it depends on the day. But my Instagram handle is Waterman dot. You can also follow Swell Wellness Hawaii. And you can email us at aloha at swellwellness.org, not .com, .org. And if you reach out to me on any one of those things, I will be happy to give you every possible bit of energy I could possibly give you to help you out because that's what people did to me. And I admit that I have gotten so lucky by people like Helma and Tim Brown and countless other people. Like the reason why I got that job at Kabuki was because I DM'd Chris Duffin one day when I was pissed off at this job that I had in Chicago and was like, I will literally wash your toilets and scrub your bathroom floors. I just want to be around to soak up the information. And he was like, yeah, cool. Like, let's talk about it. Like, I can't guarantee you anything will come of it, but I will give anyone who reaches out the time of day and the presence they deserve because I just think that's how humans should interact with people.
For sure. Love it. Big thank you to Dr. John for coming on the podcast. If anybody ever watches surfing, be on the lookout for a chill dude with a mustache in the pack. And we will catch everybody in the next episode.
Yeah, it's funny. Before this thing started, I told my wife, I was like, well, I'm either going to get invited onto a whole lot more podcasts after this or never a podcast ever again. We'll see what happens.
I think it's going to be a lot more after this. So anyways, thank you, Dr. John.
All right. Thank you, boys.
Thank you.